this is part 2 to that young adult video. Let's talk about that. A young adult series that I started last year was The Diviners. I read the first book, The Diviners, and the second book, Lair of Dreams. I started out reading The Diviners on ebook, and I was absolutely loving it, but I wasn't getting through it very quickly because I found that like I had to devote 100% of my mental energy to it, which normally I read when I'm trying to fall asleep, and so sometimes it's not happening. My brain cells just are trying to tuck themselves in at night, and I'm trying to like make them function, and it just doesn't work. So I decided to try it out on audiobook because everyone says the audiobooks are great, and they're right. They're really, really good. Although people keep saying they're a full cast, and I kind of think the one I was listening to was just one person who was just really, really good at voices. The characters by far are the most interesting part of these novels. Every single character is completely distinct. Every single character is so interesting. I haven't explained what these books are about. The Diviners is about a group of kids in the 1920s who get involved with this mystical war? I don't know. There's something suspicious happening. A bunch of them have powers of some sort, and they know that something bad is coming and they have to fight it off somehow. I've never been the greatest person at describing what something is about, apparently. It's something I'm learning. I'm not learning how to do it, I'm just learning that I'm bad at it. Evie O'Neill is the main character, and she is someone who can touch objects and see their past, see certain things about them. So when someone gets murdered, she touches a buckle on their shoe and she starts seeing possibly who killed that victim. She ends up teaming up with a couple other people who also have powers and abilities, as well as working at her uncle's museum, which I believe is just paranormal stuff or things with like dark happenings. The entire cast of characters is great. This has a love triangle that is actually interesting. Every single character in that love triangle I actually like. That is something that's never happened before. That's not true. The Stephanie Plum books does it too. My bad. I also like the side characters. Did I say who this was by? No, I didn't. This is by Libba Bray. God, what's wrong with me? Libba Bray has such a great talent for writing characters because I don't think I've ever read a book where I've just been invested and interested in every single character's storyline. And I've liked every single character. Like, there truly is not a character in this cast that I would consider a dud. The setting of like the 1920s is just so elegant and ritzy and just like so fun. This has like my perfect favorite vibe of just like retro glamour but with horror elements. Like, yes. I actually found certain parts of this spooky, which as someone who's not scared easily, that's quite a feat. The second book, Lair of Dreams, I found less spooky, but was still interesting. I listened to that one entirely on audiobook. I did feel like certain characters' storylines, Henry's specifically, it was so obvious where that storyline was going, and so the fact that we spent so much time on it was kind of irritating, but I love his character, so like, I wasn't super upset. I just wish that it wasn't as obvious as it was, I guess. Honestly, the fact that it entirely revolved around dreams just made it so that I knew I wasn't going to love it as much as the first book, because I hate anything to do with dreams. Overall, I'm just really glad that I gave this series a try, and I'm definitely going to be finishing this series at some point. I believe I gave both books 4 out of 5 stars. Another arc that I read was I Hope You're Listening by Tom Ryan. This is a YA thriller about a girl who was there when her best friend was abducted when they were children. She has never been able to kind of get past the trauma of being there for that, but she also doesn't really like to talk about it. So she started a podcast where she talks about other missing person cases and tries to help solve them. Eventually, she gets asked to help in a new investigation that may be tied to the investigation of her friend from years ago. Now, I actually don't love podcast elements in books as much as other people do. I know other people love it, but it's not really my thing because I don't necessarily think it's always done well. Now, I have not read Sadie, which I know is like what really blew this trend up, but I did read The Night Swim and hated it, so I know that like it can be done well. It just like there are times when it isn't. I think it was done okay in this book. It's definitely better than The Night Swim. And overall, I did think that this character was interesting. I think the best part about the book was the way that they talked about her trauma, because I think that was really well done and was definitely the most interesting part of the book. Now, the mystery itself, while I had no problem with it and I definitely didn't see it coming, I think a lot of people are going to be left annoyed by it, because I know that a lot of people were very annoyed by the ending of Dark Places. And it's not that these two endings are connected in any way, they're not. But just in the way that that came about, where it kind of comes out of nowhere, this has a similar sort of thing going on, and I feel like a lot of people aren't going to appreciate that. But personally, I thought it was fine. I don't know if it's the most memorable YA thriller, but it's definitely not the worst either. I gave this 3 to 5 stars. The next thing I want to talk about is Mayhem by Estelle Laure. So this book was, it was pitched as The Lost Boys meets The Craft. I've actually never seen The Craft. I know this is sacrilegious, especially considering how much I love horror, but I don't like witches. But I love The Lost Boys. That shit is part of my childhood, and it is a favorite of mine. So going into this, I expected some Lost Boys type stuff, but like the first bit of it just like completely is a ripoff of The Lost Boys. Like it's so similar that I just found it kind of cringy in ways, but it's fine. It's not a huge deal, and I definitely got past that. But honestly, I just found this book to be kind of a mess. Essentially, this is about a girl who comes to town with her mom because they're trying to flee from her stepfather, and they come to this coastal town to live with their aunt and I don't know, some other kids, and they find out that there's a bunch of missing girls who just continue to go missing in this area, and they don't know why or how. You know where this is going, and then there's some like magic in their bloodstream or something. And like overall, I just found this to be a mess. It was trying to focus on way too many things at once, but it wasn't committing itself enough to focus on any of them for long enough of a period to fully develop it. The daughter and the mother's relationship was very messy and complicated, so some time had to be devoted to that. Some time had to be devoted to the main character, finding out more about her family heritage and like where she comes from and all that. Then there was of course a romantic interest, plus the mystery, plus like possible vampires. It was just way too much for one book to tackle. In the end, I just really did not love this one, and I gave it 2.5 stars. I'm not even sure if it really deserves that, but I do go a little bit easier on YA because it's just not my genre, despite all the books I'm reading in it. Another arc that I got is Teen Killers Club by Lily Sparks. This book was about a girl who gets convicted of killing her best friend and ends up getting sent away to this program, institution, that is full of other Class A killers. Who are all teenagers, by the way. Essentially, it's a super secret government program where they train them to be assassins. This was actually kind of fun. The premise sounded ridiculous, the cover drew me in because I liked the style, and I actually kind of ended up enjoying it. I listened to it on audiobook because that's how I got the arc, and it was just kind of a good time. The characters were all pretty distinct. I didn't think it took itself too seriously. Sometimes in books, movies, TV show, whatever, when there is like a secret government program sort of plotline, I tend to find them really irritating, and they spend too much time on that. Scandal. Revenge. And I just end up losing interest entirely because it's just so stupid. Whereas in this, I feel like it kind of spent the right amount of time on it. I mean, this is entirely about this program, but the time spent on it doesn't get too serious, and that helps a lot. I I just feel like they struck the right tone with this book. But really the characters, I think, is what made me enjoy it as much as I did. It's a short book, and I think that worked in its favor because it didn't stay past its welcome. I gave this 3 stars, but like, it's a 3-star book that I would recommend. Maybe more of a 3.5 since I remember it fondly. Another book I read was 4321 by Courtney C. Stevens. This was a YA contemporary about some kids who survived a bombing on a bus, where a bunch of other people died, obviously. I didn't love this one, but I didn't hate this one. I don't remember, actually I do remember it, it didn't invest me in the way that I wanted it to, and this is once again where I realized like contemporary YA just isn't really my thing anymore. A lot of it focused on the character dynamics. This has that sort of vibe where a couple of kids who are misfits or whatever get into a car together and take a road trip, and it fits into a very specific sort of YA contemporary, where all the kids are kind of quirky, they all have different, you know, issues, but they're all gonna date anyway. I thought the characters were distinctive, but they just didn't hold any interest to me. I didn't necessarily care whether any of them got or anything. I finished it, it was 3 stars, I probably won't think about it again. The next thing I want to talk about is Vicious by VE Schwab. This was on my most disappointing books of the year list, so I didn't love it, but I honestly didn't hate it either. I gave it 3.5 stars, so let's just start off saying that. That is not a bad rating. It was a fun time. It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Vicious is about 2 guys who are good friends and classmates who eventually realize that they can get superpowers through near-death experiences. Something happens and they end up being enemies in the end. A lot of this takes place in alternating timelines in the past leading up to the incident that drove them apart, and in the present when one of them gets out of prison and wants to get revenge on the other one for sending him to prison. As I mentioned in my disappointing reads video, my issue is that this big inciting incident that drove them apart needed to be huge, and it needed to be well done, because like the entire story hinges on that one moment. And I just felt like it wasn't as well done as it should have been. The emotion that needed to be there just wasn't on page. I can understand that there was jealousy even in their friendship, but I needed to see that one moment where everything really fell apart, where the switch was triggered and now they hate each other. And I think the thing that didn't make it work was that this one thing that happened kind of happened while they weren't together, and they just like kind of talked about it on the phone. It just didn't work. I wanted to love it, and I didn't think the found family aspects worked nearly as well as other people were saying they did, because they didn't really spend that much time talking. They spent a lot more time just like thinking about each other. None of it worked as much as I wanted to. That's really all it comes down to. I liked the superhero aspect of it. I liked the villainous aspect of one of the characters and the reason why he was doing things, because it felt somewhat realistic and interesting. And so I will read the sequel. I know a lot of people hate it, but I'm hoping maybe that means I'll like it, since I didn't love this book as much as other people did. And anyways, like I said, I gave it 3.5 stars. Another thing that I was blessed enough to get as an ARC was Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. I got this on audiobook, and goddamn was it a good audiobook. I listened to this entire thing in one day, which is not something that happens. This book is about a teenage black girl who decides to audition for this singing, I don't know if it's a singing competition, a singing show, or she's just auditioning in front of producers. I don't remember how it starts. But she auditions and ends up meeting this very famous R&B singer. During this audition, she meets this very famous R&B singer, and he strikes up a relationship with her. The problem is that he is like 30 and she is still in high school. And yes, he is very, very aware of this. So obviously this was not at all directly taken from the R. Kelly situation, but there are definitely shadings of that happening in this book. I've read a lot about what R. Kelly did, and I watched the Surviving R. Kelly TV show, and so I thought that I wasn't necessarily going to be like super invested in this, but like it was so good. Tiffany D. Jackson does such a good job of walking this tightrope, of showing you all the red flags, all the ways in which this is going to go badly, all the terrible behavior he is exhibiting towards her, while also showing why she would be interested in him, because he's this huge singer and she's just like this girl still in high school who hasn't even had a chance to show people what she's got yet. She hasn't had a chance to truly flourish and start her career, and she just wants that shot. And she can't believe that this famous singer who could have anybody would be interested in her. You know, as an adult, it's very easy for me to see all the ways in which he's manipulating her and all the ways in which this isn't okay. But as a former teenage girl, I can understand how she would just feel so special at the way he treated her. This book also tackles how black girls specifically are overlooked and are often ignored because their trauma just somehow isn't as important, or because they're considered more grown. I haven't read any other Tiffany D. Jackson books, but there are 2 more books definitely on my radar that I want to read by her. I will say the actual thriller aspects of this and mystery aspects of it weren't my favorite. The ending I found like a bit over the top, because I just feel like the trauma stuff was so riveting in its own right and so well done and well explored that was really like where I enjoyed the story the most. But I also understand that mystery thrillers kind of provide a hook to get this message and this storyline out to an audience. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was a really, really great book. Now I figured I'd squeeze in just a couple YA comics that I read. The first thing I read was Fangs, which was essentially just a quick little snapshots of a relationship between a vampire and a werewolf. These are very much like comics you would see in a newspaper, where they're just 1-page little strips instead of like a full ongoing storyline. I didn't think I would enjoy this, but it was actually cute and kind of fun. It wasn't anything mind-blowing or like profound, but I think if you enjoyed Twilight, this would be a great like gag gift, because it's enjoyable and cheesy, but in a good way. I think I gave it 3.5 or 4 stars out of 5. It was a fun time. And then the last thing I read was Juliet Takes a Breath, which I know this is an adaptation of a book, but I didn't read the book, so I can't tell you if it does the book justice. I can just tell you of what I thought of the comic. And Juliet Takes a Breath, I'd probably give a 4 star. Juliet Takes a Breath is about a girl who leaves her hometown to work for this famous white feminist lady. She does like an internship for her, and it's just about her kind of finding herself and finding what she stands for. It talks a lot about the ways in which white feminism is lacking, in the ways in which white feminism doesn't serve people of color. But it does it in a way that is so easy to understand and is so relatable. I mean, like, I'm white, so relatable to that age group. I always love a story that is more about a girl coming into her own than it is about a girl who is just finding love or something. Like, I love that this was about just a coming of age story instead of focused on like making out. So those are all the YA I don't know, that I read. I hope you liked this video, and I hope you'll come back in soon. Bye.